welcome to Thinking Ahead with the Fitness Business Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Stowell. Thinking Ahead's mission is to seek out expert guests who will get us all thinking ahead and challenging us to turn ideas into actions. We discuss concepts, ideas, and strategies that are yet to be trending because we want you, our listeners, setting the trends, not following them. Joining us on today's show, we welcome Jeff Tobe. Jeff is one of the most dynamic certified professional speakers in the entire world. He is the author of Coloring Outside the Lines and co-author of the best-selling books, The Sales Coach and The Communication Coach. Some of Jeff's clients include PNC Bank, Microsoft, Remax, Erickson Living, and Pepsi Cola, just to name a few. This is an incredible show, and I couldn't be any more excited to share this with you, our listeners. So, Jeff, thank you so very much for being here with me today. It's truly an honor to host you, sir.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm excited to be here.
So, full disclosure, January 2020, I read your book, Coloring Outside the Lines, for the first time, and I took 8 pages of notes because I thought, wow, this is such an important...
It's only 8 pages long, I think.
And there were so many incredible lessons in it. And of course, as everybody knows, and you know, the pandemic happened shortly thereafter and priorities shifted. And now that we find ourselves in a position as an industry rebuilding, I thought, wow, these lessons are more important now than they ever were before.
Right.
And so I just saw a quote from you the other day that I would like to share that says, the only thing that differentiates your service or your product from any others is your ability to look at what you do from a whole new perspective.
Isn't that true?
And if you don't mind, can you tell us just a little bit more about that, please?
Sure. And now more than ever, Jason, if I can add that, obviously we have to look at what we do differently than we have before. And so the bottom line is, I talk about creative thinking. That's the first thing. And creative thinking is simply getting yourself outside your comfort zone. And like I say, like you just said, looking at what you do differently. So let's look at the health and wellness world from our customers' perspective. And I just want to clarify that when I say customer, I always say every one of us have internal and external customers. External customers are easy. Those are the members, we can probably define those. But internal customers, anybody without whom we can't do what we do every single day. I want to give your viewers a kind of a different perspective there, because most people would say, "Oh, it's my team," but I consider my UPS driver an internal customer. I mean, if he doesn't show up on the days that I need him to pick up my parcels, I'm out of business. So he's a vital part to doing what I do every single day. So there's the mind shift, if you will, when we're talking about looking at the profession, looking at the industry differently than we have before.
Well, that's an excellent perspective. You're right, because when we think of teams, right, we always look at inside and how we can leverage those relationships. But you're right, it's really a web that extends far outside of our small.
Well, as you know, Jason, when I talk about creative thinking, I'm talking about creative thinking as it applies to what we're calling the customer experience. And then the third piece is by getting your people more engaged in what they do every day. And to me, they're inextricable. There's a fourth piece too, and that's leadership. I talk a lot about leadership because none of it works without effective leadership.
Well, that's a great segue, because really what our show is positioned is helping owners and operators understand what we need to be to best position ourselves, our business, and what we do to the community. So can you dive into a little bit as in a post-pandemic state as leaders, how we need to think about our value propositions a little bit differently?
Absolutely.
Please?
Sure. I think I shared with you offline that my wife, Jim, went completely virtual, as many did for a long time. And what I think happened was that they're having trouble getting people back, not just because of the pandemic, but I mean back as in paying a membership, because they offered it for free for so long. So there's a dynamic that's happening in your workplace that in your marketplace that is a huge obstacle. But as leaders, one of the things I say is that you really have to become a relationship manager versus a task manager. Let me share a quick story if I can, Jason. When things shut down back a year and a half ago or so, I had an appointment that week to get my teeth cleaned. Just go to my dentist, get my teeth cleaned, and of course we had to cancel it. The day of my appointment, I opened my front door of my house. I looked down and there's this little package. And in the package is everything you get when you get your teeth cleaned. I mean, your toothbrush, your toothpaste, your floss and everything else. and a little card that said, we're sorry this is happening. We miss you, Jeff, and we can't wait till you can come back to get your teeth cleaned in person. Dr. Denise. And that's what I'm talking about. Do you realize that somebody in that office had to take the time to actually come to my house and drop it at my front door? That's what I'm talking about. During these times, have we maintained those relationships? Far more important than the task part of it, if you know what I mean. And just the follow up to that is just 2 weeks ago, I went to get my teeth cleaned,
Yeah.
and for real. And I was talking to them about it and how it impressed me, and I shared it with audiences worldwide. And the young lady who was cleaning my teeth, I guess hygienist, I guess she would be, said to me, "Oh my gosh," she said, "we had so much fun doing it. We couldn't wait to see where people live. You know, you deal with patients all the time, but you have no clue where they live or how they live." And I thought, wow, the other side of that, not just from the customer's point of view, but how about that we got everybody engaged at what they're doing too. And the premise that I go by is the more engaged people are internally, the better the experience externally. So that was a
Wow.
long answer to your question. I'm sorry.
No, this is honestly, this is the stuff that is so important right now, because I think what you're alluding to is it's a culture of excellence where everyone owns the experience. Like you said, it wasn't me telling my staff to do a thing. They were excited to be part of it. And that's such a
Yeah,
inspiring leadership.
and it had nothing to do with what they do for their job.
Yeah.
So, your people might have trainers who are, training all day and that's what they're focused on. But this, how do we get them outside their comfort zone, kind of going that extra mile? That's what engagement is.
So in your book, Coloring Outside the Lines, you had talked a couple different strategies to kind of get there as a team. One of them that I was really inspired by was brain sparking. So do you mind if I ask selfishly a little bit more about that process and how maybe leaders in our industry would go about launching around those kind of initiatives?
Sure. So first of all, brain sparking, the word, I made it up because to me, brainstorming was just too violent. I don't know. But all it's about, just at a very basic level, is allowing people to sort of formulate ideas. What do I mean? Typically we get into a meeting room and we go, okay, here's our problem. How do we solve it? Jason, Bob, Jane, how do we solve it? And so people are put on the spot. Whereas brain sparking is kind of uploading the computer up here and giving it time, because you'd be amazed. You'll be doing 10 other things and all of a sudden you'll say, oh, wait, I know exactly what we should do. Or you'll be out you'll be out for dinner and you see something as it applies to customer experience or something that they're doing in this restaurant. You say, why don't we bring that back into our gym and massage it a little bit, but implement it. So brain sparking at a very high level is simply uploading the computer, if you will. I think the other thing is that we have to, everybody has to have accountability for something. And so when I talk about customer experience, I talk about touch points, and maybe we'll get into this a little later, but the bottom line is that we need to know who owns the touch points, because that's when people can get creative. So if we say, you know what, our parking lot is filthy. Our landlord isn't doing anything about it. We need to do something about it, because that's first impression when people drive up. Who wants to own the parking lot? And as silly as it sounds, when people take responsibility and accountability for something, then they'll be more apt to change it. So back to brain sparking. Brain sparking itself is just a method to come up with ideas. So I like to say the old adage is there's no such thing as a bad idea. You know what? There is such a thing as a bad idea. Sorry. It's like saying the customer is always right. I don't believe that. The customer is not always right. They're always the customer, but they're not always right. And we can't tell them they're wrong, but that's a whole other story. I grew up in retail, Jason. So I have these little things in my head that my dad used to teach me. But anyway, it's really about coming up with possible ideas with I like to say it's okay to color outside the lines as long as you don't fall off the page, right? And so there is an edge of the page. So we can't just be, it's time consuming. It burns up resources just to throw out crazy ideas. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't be an observer of life. And that's what I was talking about. Let your people go out and see the world. When I say take them on a field trip, When you experience amazing customer experience, why not go on a field trip? In other words, I had an amazing experience at a restaurant in Evansville, Indiana last week. And I thought, if I have my staff there who work virtually, but if I had them, I would take them to this restaurant and ask them afterwards, debrief the experience you just had. And how can we apply that to our business? So the brain sparking is all about that creative process of allowing people to open their minds a little bit. The second piece, I know you asked a question that I'm
This is amazing,
about,
please.
but the second piece is what I call looking for the second right answer. So I truly believe that there's always more than one right answer to every single challenge your customer brings you, internal or external. So we have to force ourselves to say, okay, that's the first right answer. And probably every gym in our neighborhood, every competitor is doing the same thing. What's the second right answer? What's the third right answer? And when we force ourselves to do that, we get more and more creative. So I like to use the analogy of, again, a restaurant, but I worked at a restaurant many years ago. I was a waiter, and there was a saying, 86. Do you know what 86 something means?
I don't.
86 the onions means to get rid of it, or 86 the tomato soup because we have no more. So human beings have the tendency to 86 their ideas before they ever have a chance to develop. And I like to challenge people. I say, think of it as a road trip to somewhere you've never been. The first 1/3 of the journey is easy. It's in your city. It's in the suburbs. You've been here 1,000 times before. The next third is maybe in the state where you live, or the province, and it's it's a little, you've been there, but it's not as comfortable. And then the third part, you've never been there before. Same thing with brain sparking. So the first part is it's comfortable. It's just what everybody's going to say. The second part is a little uncomfortable, and the third part, we've never been there before. So think of it as a road trip.
That is very cool. And as you're saying, I do the 86 thing. That's right, 86 thing idea. That's tremendous. And I can tell you, a lot of my listeners will be relieved to hear you say not the customer isn't always right.
Good.
That'll take help. If we could circle back, because you mentioned touch points was, again, another great point, because I saw an interesting statistic the other day. So we know that if we can plug members into 2 programs inside of our agencies, our buildings, our businesses, that generally retention is pretty strong because they're really engaged with us, right? But there's a certain portion of the population that just wants access. They want to come in, they want to get the treadmill, their weights, they want to leave. And we know that the loyalty, if you will, in these net promoter scores is based on how friendly the front desk person is, right? Because that is the person that sets the pace for, are you welcome or feel less than welcome. So can you talk a little bit about the touch points and how each engagement with our members can no longer just be a random experience, and how, as you speak to in the book, like we can't afford not to create these wow moments.
Exactly. Wow, surprise, and delight. Those are the 3 words that I would love for everybody listening to have in their heads when it comes to every single touch point. So, what is a touch point? Let's start there. And I think it's vital. Let me backtrack a little bit. I want to give your people a exercise that they can take back, and they can engage their people right away. Remember what I said, the more engaged people are internally, the better the experience externally. But to give you the exercise, you have to know the definition of a touch point. And a touch point is any opportunity we have to influence the customer experience. Let me say it again. Any opportunity we have to influence the customer experience. So, what are touch points? First of all, if the exercise simply needs a flip chart or some kind of a write on, write off board, that's all. Get your people together, even if it's just by department, if you're that big, or try and get everyone together in the whole organization. Give them that definition, any opportunity we have to influence the customer experience, and then say, what are our touch points in any given day? At first, it's like pulling teeth. I've done this many, many times with organizations. It's tough. But then you have to remind them things like, remember the parking lot? There's a touch point. I come in and the men's room is dirty. Touch point. Whatever it is. So we have hundreds of touch points in any given day. An invoice we send somebody, our on hold message, our voice, whatever it is. So what you'll end up with in this exercise, and bite your tongue if you're a leader, because You may hear things that you don't even, agree with, but write them all down. And what I find typically, Jason, is you end up with 25 to 30 different touch points. Remember what I said before, then say, okay, let's now take a break. I'm going to have some markers up here. I want you to come up and put a check mark beside the top 5. It's not a magic number. Could be 6, could be 8, but the top 5 priority touch points for us right now. And then stand back and watch. See, I believe that engagement starts at a grassroots level and works its way up. It does not come from management down. And so if this is true, we have to get people engaged. So now you come back after the break. You've identified your top 5 touch points. And basically you'd say, well, I can give you a case history, if you will. I had the opportunity to work with a company called Shadow Milk Company in Missouri, here in the States. And a very small company, 65 people. And they do exactly what you think they would do. They process milk. They have two customers. They pick up milk from the farmer, they process it, then they sell it to small retailers in their region. So I had these people, we did the exercise, we came back, and the number one priority they identified, the number one touch point they identified in the organization were their drivers. Think about it. Who has more frontline contact with the customer than their drivers, right? Pick up and deliver it. So I took the 6 drivers aside at lunch. I said, congratulations on being identified as the number one touch point in the organization. You should have seen their faces. I don't think they'd ever been recognized before. I said, what's one thing we could do to tweak, to make better this one little touch point called pickup and delivery? Without hesitation, and I love this, the guy said to me, well, when I tell people what I do or where I work at Shadow Milk Company, I get a bit of a giggle. I was wondering if we could use that somewhere in the organization. Guess what? On the back of every Shadow Milk Company truck, it now says, in case of accident, please have cookies ready. Lots and lots and lots of cookies, right? And the point is this, yes, you pull up behind the truck and maybe you smile and you associate it with Shadow Milk Company, but that's not the power of it. What do you think the driver, not the driver of the truck I'm talking about, the driver who said it, what do you think he's saying to everybody he knows? What do you think?
Yeah. Wow. Awesome. You seen this truck sharing it?
And it's my idea.
Yeah.
Look at that. It's on every truck and it's my idea. Do you think he's satisfied at work or do you think he's engaged? He's engaged.
Yeah.
And so if we get people to own those touch points and then just ask them, how do we tweak those little touch points combined will change the entire external experience. I know it's again a long story, but I love that.
I thank you for sharing your wisdom, because honestly, this is how we, especially as an industry, we're still a very small industry by market size, and learning from resources like you is what helps us. And as you said, I have even right now multiple cleaning staff walking around the facility who are greeting and saying hi to members they see on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And am I being intentional right now with the opportunity that presents itself with those touch points? And you're right. It's a fascinating proposition to reconsider. Are these opportunities to create more happiness, like brand loyalty?
And the question becomes, have you asked those people who are walking around cleaning and saying hello, have you asked them how to tweak their touch points? Because that's when they become engaged, right? Too many leaders sort of tell them what to do and say, this is going to be a great thing to help you with your touch point, whatever that is. But instead, we need to get that feedback from them. And the accountability and ownership is key. One more, just quickly, to give you an example. I did this with a very large organization, 295 employees in Greensboro, North Carolina. And it was a country club, typical country club, big country club in the area. And we did the exercise. We came back, they identified number one priority touch point was parking. Now, you have to understand that they don't have enough parking. So when they have an event, people were parking on the street, they were parking on the neighbors' lawns, they were getting tickets, they were getting towed away. And the manager, when I walked in after the break and looked, and he looked at me and goes, parking? Are you kidding me? See, that's not what I'm talking about, because it's theirs. They own it. You can't argue with it. And so when I got up and I said, okay, let's look at parking, I said, who owns parking? And the greenskeepers looked at maintenance, and maintenance looked at management, and management looked at greenskeepers. Nobody owned it, right? And so finally we got maintenance to say, okay, we own it. We need to do something about it. And they put together a whole team to study the parking and what they could do with parking. So It's that ownership that's key as well.
That's a great idea. So if I as a leader want to elicit change tomorrow in my organization, how would you recommend we start? Do we call a big all skate meeting, or do we start asking questions? Like, how would you plan out for the very first steps of implementing change?
So I first of all, let me backtrack, because you used a word at the beginning of our talk that kind of makes the hair on my back of my neck stand up, and you wouldn't know it. You wouldn't know it. So no blame here. And you said the culture. Are we going to change the culture? Why should we change the culture? I say that's why we have a rear view mirror to look at culture, but we have a windshield to look at what I call the climate. And let me explain the difference. Climate is part of the culture. Just like outside, the climate's always changing. Same thing in the organization. So don't put it on your shoulders to change the culture. I would present it to everyone as, okay, we're going to have a meeting to change the climate because of what's been going on. I would have an all hands on deck meeting, and I would absolutely do the exercise I was just talking about, because that's going to get people on board. They're going to say, wow, things are changing, things are different, right? So why are people, the question we have to ask ourselves is, why are people threatened by change? And there's a couple of reasons. I ask this of all groups. I work one-on-one in consulting with organizations, the customer experience. It's the first thing I do. 3 questions that I have them ask. The first is, why are people so threatened by change? And what I hear typically is fear of the unknown, fear of failure. And I once heard that fear is just an acronym for false evidence appearing real. I like that, because it may not be real to you as a leader, but it's very real to the person experiencing it. And I find that most people are afraid of failure or the unknown because failure has never been debriefed. So we've never said to our people, you know what, we failed. What did we learn from it? Instead, we ended up blaming somebody for failure. So that's part of this meeting. I would ask that question, put them in groups, have them discuss it. The second question is, how do we get past but that's the way we've always done it syndrome? And the TTWADI syndrome. That's the way we've always done it. I'm sure everyone has experienced this. How do we get past that syndrome? And it really is by example, showing them examples of where this has worked. It's by communication. And the last piece, it's by allowing them to ask why. Why do we do it this way? Maybe why and why not? Why not try this, right? But most of us don't have a climate where that's acceptable. So we have to encourage that. And then the third one is, how do we move our customer outside of their comfort zone? Again, it's our member and it's our internal customer. How do we move them outside of their comfort zone? And, they've automatically, in your profession, they've automatically been moved the last year, right? They're outside of their comfort zone. And maybe it's a case of how do we get them back into the comfort zone? Because I do a lot of work in healthcare. People are scared to go to the hospital right now. You know what? People are scared to go to gyms right now too. It doesn't matter if things are lightening up, but in general, a lot of people are still scared. So how do we address that head on? How do we show them that we're the safest place in town? That kind of thing.
What I love about that is I read something. I can't remember the exact book now, so I don't want to steal a quote from somebody, but it was that imbalance creates opportunity. So if you're overweight, we have Weight Watchers. If you're lonely, we have Match.com and pieces like that. And so, like you said, the pandemic has created imbalance. I saw something like the average weight gain, undesirable weight gain, was like 28 pounds in the last year.
I'm living proof. They call it the freshman 15. Didn't they call it the COVID 15? I think
the camera's here for a very specific
That's
reason.
Exactly right.
So this imbalance, if it's creating opportunity, another quote that I pulled from your book was, are you expandable? Are you expendable? And right. So how do we are finally at the stage now where we're seeing consumer sentiment is 80% of the people are coming back in our facilities, and we're starting to realize more and more some revisiting, as well as new business. People that weren't even thinking of their health pre-pandemic is now very interested in first steps. So do you have any recommendations about how maybe buying styles have changed post-pandemic? It's fitness related, specifically, if you will, and how we need to let me take it back. How we should pivot our approach to welcoming these opportunities now as opposed to 2020?
Yeah, I think that we have to look for those opportunities where other people see only limited sort of limitations, let's say. And that's a saying in my book as well. I call it the Harvey principle, but we can talk about that after. But the bottom line is, how do we see those opportunities where everyone else sees limitations? So we've got to really listen. And I say, listen between the lines. It's a plug for coloring outside the lines, but listen between the lines to your customer. They are, I think that you, especially in your industry, have a much more savvy customer than you did even a year and a half ago. Why? Because they realize that there are choices out there now. My daughter is a good example. My daughter started a 80-day training with I won't mention the name, but an online, super body kind of place. And she went through all 80 days and she's saying to herself, do I need to go back to my gym? I like getting up on my own pace whenever I want, and I can, turn it on when I want. And I feel like they're still talking to me. And so now we have to look at things from the customer's perspective. I love to say this. I love to say, if you see the world through your customer's eyes, you'll see the way your customer buys. Let me say it again. See the world through their eyes, and you'll see the way your customer buys. So it's now putting ourselves in their shoes if we haven't done that before. How do we see fitness from their perspective now? So maybe, you mentioned NPS, Net Promoter Score, and maybe not everyone who's listening understands it. But there are certain KPIs, which are key performance indicators, that we should be measuring. One is NPS. And if I can, be so bold just to say very quickly, we've all done it. We may not know what it was called. It was basically on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being absolutely, 1 being absolutely not. Would you recommend us? But the bottom line is it's a survey of our customers. When was the last time that everyone who's listening and watching, everyone in your audience surveyed their customers? The second piece, and I'm getting off track a little, but the second piece is we have to, now that's external. Now we have to do an employee engagement survey. We need benchmarks to where we are now. And the third piece is just, you do it anyway. In your business, you happen to do it anyway, and that's member retention. But what about employee retention as well? And so it doesn't matter the size of the business. Those are three things that everyone can become a cheerleader for. If it's just membership sales, guess what? Your receptionist, even though they may be a cheerleader, really doesn't care. But those are three things that everyone in the organization, from maintenance to to your trainers, can get behind and be a cheerleader for. So have I gone way off track?
It's interesting. I appreciate that you're spurring even the mind, because my very next piece I was going to ask you about, you just touched on, was looking at the world through your prospective member client's eyes.
Yes.
But I think what you were inferring was taking another step, like look through the world through my receptionist's eyes and my personal trainer's eyes, right? Exactly. Their experience and how they align with me, as well as the value they give to my members is unique.
Yes, with you, and how did they align with the values of the organization? Mm-hmm. That's another key point. Usually leaders will say, how do they align with my values, even if they own the business? But you know what? Have you communicated clear values that we live by in the organization, and then seeing how people accept those values or live by those values? The other thing you bring up, Jason, I told you I work with a lot of small rural hospitals. It's just a niche that I've had working patient experience. And what I have them do is I have them do cross education and not cross training, because if I say that in your world, it means something else. But cross education, it simply means, I have them take one person out of a department and put them with the receptionist just for an hour. I want them to see what he or she goes through. Then I have the receptionist go to accounting and sit with accounting for 1 hour. I'm not trying to get them to learn the job. I'm just trying to get them to see it from their perspective. And that cross education is an amazing tool to getting people engaged as well.
I love that. You're right. That's interesting. Just having scheduling times for even the executive, the CEO, to sit and swipe cards, just to experience. What a powerful Absolutely. Piece.
Yeah.
Tremendous.
And how powerful is that for your member to see the CEO or to see the leader sitting there and swiping cards, giving out towels, whatever it is. So,
yeah. So you, switching gears, you had mentioned communication, because communication is key to everything. And one of the pieces of your book that I really liked too was context matters, right? I forget the exact number, but the top 500 words have 10,000 plus meanings depending on you use them.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about the context and how maybe we should re-articulate our message to, again, both our staff and then of course to our prospective members and members.
Right. So this all goes back to a statistic or a study, I guess, that said that if 100% of our effectiveness in communication was made up of the words we use, our tone of voice, and our body language, what percentage is the words we use? Well, it's actually only 10%. Mm-hmm. Our tone of voice is 30%, and our body language is 60%. Now, there have been a lot of studies that go against that, but let's just take that as an example. So the English language, I don't know anybody, you'll have people around the world who English is a second language. And to me, it's got to be a tough language because depending on context, we have so many meanings for any given word. Let me try something with your people. Let's use a pen, okay? And 7 words. I didn't say John stole the pen. Think about what I mean each time I say it, right? I didn't say John stole the pen. It means somebody else said it, right? I didn't say John stole the pen. I'm adamant. I didn't say it. I didn't say John stole the pen. I implied it. I didn't say John stole the pen. Somebody else stole it. I didn't say John stole the pen. He borrowed it. I didn't say John stole the pen. He stole another one, right? I didn't say John stole the pen. He stole something else. So a prime example that we have to be aware of our body language and our tone of voice, and really, of the context in which we're talking to our people. So let me ask you, Jason, put you on the spot. If 60% is our body language, 30% is our tone of voice, and 10% of the words we use, what are the 2 most dangerous communication tools we have at our disposal today?
Physical appearance.
Yeah, no, because that's body language. Where do we lose our body language and our tone of voice?
Email.
Exactly. Email and texting. Because the minute we sit down and we start to type, the minute we start to thumb, we've lost 60% of our body language. We've lost 30% of our tone of voice. We are now down to 10% of the words we use. And I know it's comfortable, and that's probably how many people who are watching and listening to this communicate with their people. Send them an email, send them a text. But we have to ask ourselves before we hit the send button, see the world from their perspective. Are they going to understand exactly what I'm trying to say? I am the only person, I hate to admit this, I think I'm the only person in Monroeville, Pennsylvania, when I lived there, to have been fired from a volunteer position. That's not an easy thing to do. I sent an email to my board of directors. I knew exactly what I meant. It's just not how they took it. That's all. So communication is everything right now. And especially because we're doing it remotely so much, So now we're on a Zoom call and, I can see you. I understand that this is also a podcast, so people will be listening. But when you're listening, you can't see my body language. You can only hear my tone of voice and the words I use. So you have to start thinking in terms of what message am I giving them.
By chance, just maybe 2 weeks ago, one of my direct reports sent me an email saying that I need to start putting smiley faces or frowny faces at the end of each sentence, because I could never tell if I was upset or not when I was writing. Because you're right, I was being less loquacious, more curt.
Right.
And it's something that I took for granted, but you're right. That's especially now.
Well, I do a lot of work in behavioral styles. Have you ever done like Myers-Briggs or DISC or colors?
I have, sir, yes.
Yeah, and so I'm sure a lot of the people who are listening to this have done that as well. And that comes into this, because you got to think, I'm very direct. I'm fast-paced, and so that comes across in my email as well. And that's what I think they're saying to you, Jason. I don't know you well, but we've met a few times, and I would say that you're somewhat like that. You're a kind of DISC. Get down to business quickly, and don't bother me with the details. Just give me facts, right? But that can come through in our communication as well. So we have to be careful.
I appreciate that. That's something we take for granted.
And by the way, the person sending you the smiley faces is not the same style as you. So just saying.
Yeah, no doubt. So Jeff, if you don't mind me asking, this has been fantastic. If there's one takeaway that my listeners should take from this show, that once they hit stop, they can rethink, reposition their own processes, what would you recommend, sir?
One thing that I would recommend, it would be stop trying to eat the elephant. You know, the old joke, how to eat an elephant one bite at a time. I think right now, if you want to improve the customer experience, you want to attract more members and increase your bottom line, focus internally, not externally. That would be the first step. Have that all hands-on meeting. Have people own their touch points and tell you how they're going to just tweak those touch points. They know better than you, even as a leader, how they can tweak their own touch point. And I think just that alone would be something I would do immediately.
That's terrific advice. Thank you so much. So now if my listeners want to get a hold of you, talk to you about the potential of having you come speak for their organizations, how can they best get in touch with you, sir?
Can I make an offer?
Yeah, please.
Oh, listen, if people are interested in my book, Coloring Outside the Lines, it's normally $19.95 retail. They can get it because of this podcast for $7. That's all, just $7. All they need to do is send me an email. My email address is jeff@jefftobe.com. That's jeff@jefftobe.com, and put in the subject line the name of the podcast and just put $7 book and how I can reach out to them to get their credit card information. I don't want them sending that in an email. And if they are international, if they're outside of the US, then it would be the same $7, and I'll send them a PDF of the book. That's
tremendous. And like I said, I should second to everybody that you should read this book, because I said I've read it twice now, and it's just an enormous honor to have you on the show.
And I have to brag, it's the only business book in the world illustrated by my then 12-year-old daughter. So I hope you enjoyed that as well.
It's incredible. I can't thank you enough for this time, sir.
My pleasure.
So with that being said, I just want to thank you again. Thanks.
Thank you.